In 6.19, we need to talk about the structure and function of the villus, right? Those little fingers in the small intestine, and how it allows to absorb and also transport all the things that you've broken down, right? All the things you've eaten and broken down. So the products of digestion. And there are four things that we're going to talk about. So we're going to talk about how there's structures that allow it to have more surface area for more places for diffusion to occur. We're going to talk about the fact that it's only one cell thick or one cell thin. I never understood why we said one cell thick. Anyway, so that's a very short diffusion pathway. We're going to talk about the role of the rich blood supply and what that allows, how that allows absorption and transport to work well, and also this thing called a lacteal. So I'm going to use the image that I have here. I'm just going to blow it up a little bit so we can see it better. All right. So the surface area one I think is pretty easy. So instead of just having, actually, before we do that, why don't we do a little bit of review? So we're talking about the layers of the small intestine. I'm just going to move this up a little bit so we can see it better. Maybe it's not going to let me. Oh, well. So we talked about the layers of the small intestine. So we talked about there's the villi, right? We talked about this whole epithelial layer. And right under the epithelial layer, there's two layers. There's the mucosa layer. And underneath the mucosa layer, there's a submucosa layer. And then under that, we have our two muscles. And you remember which one is on the inside? The one that squeezes and causes that little sphincter. Those are circular muscles. And then here we have our longitudinal muscles. So that is review. All right. Let's erase all that. So let's talk about surface area first. Obviously, by having these little fingers here, it allows you to have more places for diffusion. And as we mentioned before, even those little cells right there, they all have fingers on them as well, right? We can see all those little cells right there. Those epithelial cells have microvilli to increase surface area. So that's the surface area component. Also, the fact that it's only one cell thick, if I have my glucose molecule out here in the lumen, right, it just has to go through this one cell and eventually into our blood vessels here that we see in red. So it's a really short diffusion pathway. Let's talk about the blood vessels. So that's the third thing we need to talk about. Because the blood is coming in here and goes up the villi and then goes back down and eventually gets used somewhere in your body, it's bringing fresh blood in with a low glucose, for example, or amino acid or whatever molecule we're talking about, with a low glucose level, for example. So we're going to want to diffuse from a high concentration. If you're eating food, you're going to have all this glucose molecules in the lumen of your small intestine. They're going to diffuse from high concentration to low concentration, and that low concentration will be in the blood. So by constantly bringing in fresh blood, you've created a low concentration in the blood in relation to the high concentration in the lumen of your small intestine. So that helps us maintain that concentration gradient. And the fourth function of the villus, our structure of the villus that allows it to do its function, is the fats issue. The problem with fats is that fats are non-polar, right? So they like to go wherever they want. They need to be contained. They need to be controlled. And they can't just travel in your blood because they're just going to wander through the walls of the capillaries. So they have to travel in the lymph system. And they travel in lymph vessels. And these lymph vessels branch off up into the villi that you can see here to form this structure called a lacteal. So lacteal's role is specifically to transport your fats. So those are the four things. Let's review. Surface area with villi and microvilli. It's only one cell thick for a short diffusion pathway. It has a rich supply of blood that's fresh to maintain concentration gradient, and the lacteal for transporting fats.